The meeting of the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Garcia?
Aye. Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Present.
Director Jackson?
Present.
Director Simpson?
Present.
Chair Herndon?
Present.
We have 5 committee members present, and Director Zomber is joining the committee.
Thank you very much. The Chair will now ask the Secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The Chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being conducted from the Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public access and participation as possible, this meeting is also being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we will have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience. We're waiting for the announcement at this point.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Thank you. For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker slip and bring it to our board clerk, Dr. Mann. Virtual speakers are asked to remain on the platform until you are called upon. After speaking, virtual speakers may follow the rest of the meeting using the broadcast information previously mentioned. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. For the sake of fairness and to give everyone a chance to speak, the chair reserves the right to limit the length of time allowed to any one speaker. Written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the board. Send this testimony to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53201-2181, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair of the committee. Also, any questions or requests, including those from the public, committee members, or the administration, or to be directed toward the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who engages in such harassing or intimidating words or actions will immediately be asked to cease. If such behavior continues, a recess will be called and the offending parties will be removed from the meeting. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. However, the individual will not be allowed to rejoin the meeting. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the Meetings, Agendas, and Minutes page of the MPS website. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Item number 1 is action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 7.45, Arts Education. The recommendation is that the board approve the revisions to the policies as outlined in the attachments to this item.
Would the administration please present this item?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. The item before you on this evening's agenda is a revision to the Administrative Policy 7.45 on art education. Dr. Deborah Boland, Manager of Fine Arts, is here with me to review the recommendation and revisions as attached. Following the review, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have in regard to this item. Dr. Boland.
Good evening, Dr. Deborah Bowling, Manager of Fine Arts. Director Herndon, members of the committee, we are here this evening looking at Administrative Policy 7.45, which is on arts education. Looking at number 5, which is about the monitoring and evaluation of the policy. We would like to change the first one, A, that biannually, instead of March and August, we would move to reporting in October and May to report to the board on the district's art education programs. Due to, we'll be able to provide you much more accurate data in those reports. And adding B, that the fine arts manager will report that board policy 7.45 is being met based on information from school leaders and the Office of School Administration, and board directors will receive that report each year, also in October and May. Those are the revisions that we would like to put forward today.
Thank you. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions regarding this item? Seeing no hands, Madam Secretary, do we have members of the public that wish to make comments?
Madam Chair, we have no request for public testimony on this item.
What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Director Kolgandi.
I move that we approve the revisions to Administrative Policy 7.545.
Is there any further discussion? Director Jackson?
No discussion.
Okay. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director Gokul-Gandhi's motion to approve the administration's recommendation relative to revisions to Policy 7.45, Arts Education. On the motion as read, Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Jackson?
Aye, can I say a question? We didn't second the motion.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, given that this is still at the committee level, seconds are reserved for the full board.
I don't.
Thank you. Director Simpson?
Aye.
Chair Herndon?
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 2, which is action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 7.44, Music Education. The recommendation is that the board approve the revisions to Administrative Policy 7.44, Music Education.
Thank you. Would the administration please present this item?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, the item before you on this evening's agenda is a revision to Administrative Policy 7.44 on music education. Sherry Garcia, Curriculum Specialist, is here with me to review the recommendations, revisions as attached. After Sherry's complete, we'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have in regards to this item. Sherry?
Thank you. Chair Herndon, members of the committee, Sherry Garcia, Music Curriculum Specialist. So we're here tonight to present some proposed changes to Music Administration Policy 7.44. And really, our changes come from a place of wanting to honor some student choice and voice, and also a couple of teacher retention items that have come up over the past few years that we've had this policy in place. So the first item that we would request to change is item number 2C, which is an item regarding music instruction. So our suggestion is that we remove the specificity and change this item to include performing ensemble classes and also classes for non-performers, in an attempt to really make things inclusive and allow all of the different kinds of performing ensembles that are available to students in our city to be represented, rather than listing them specifically. We're including them all under the guise of performance. And then the other addition to add non-performance is to give our students an option to do things that are not necessarily in front of an audience. So something like music technology, maybe a solo guitar class, things that are a little bit more individual and less of an ensemble nature, and also give us an opportunity to add things that are culturally relevant and things that our students are really interested in doing, some of which happen to be non-performance music options. On the next piece of this is under item 3, hours of instruction, and we are looking to change just a single number in number 4. So rather than including all of grades 6 through 8, we're including grade 6 on its own, and that reflects the Department of Public Instruction's policy that music instruction is required up through the 6th grade. And then if you look at the next one, item 5, we are making a provision that grades 7 and 8 shall be offered music instruction in each school, but it is not a requirement. It should be something that the students themselves have the option to choose. If they would like to participate in music, they are certainly welcome to, and it should be offered in their school. But many students, by the time they reach the age of 13 or 14, really know what's for them, and if they're able to have art instruction, they maybe would want to choose that. So we want it to be available and offered to every child, but we want their voice to be heard. If it's something that they're passionate about, they can do it, and if it's not, then they would have an option to pursue another kind of art. The next one includes number 4, and we're adding a procedure that talks specifically to how instruments are moved about the district, how they're loaned out, and how they're managed as a part of what we do in our course of work in the music office. And then the last item is number 5, which is very similar to the art item. We would like to make our reports to the board in October and May, when we can give the most specific information regarding staffing and other initiatives. And then adding this line, the music curriculum specialist will report that board policy 7.44 is being met based on information from school leaders and the Office of School Administration. Board directors will receive that report each year in October and May.
We're complete.
Thank you. Superintendent Posley? Ms. Garcia, is that the end of it?
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. Do committee members wish to ask questions or make comments? Director Gandhi?
Thank you so much for that. Just a couple of clarification questions I would like to ask. So could you talk a little bit about the change in wording and what that would do to the offering of instrumental and vocal music to grades 7 and 8 in high school? And would there be any unintended consequences of changing the wording in 2C, or what really does that mean in practice?
Chair Herndon, Director Gokul Gandhi, our intent was to be inclusive rather than exclusive. So by listing things simply as performing ensembles, that would give options for every kind of performing ensemble. If we list things specifically band, orchestra, and choir, the more traditional performing ensembles, to me that seems very narrow. It doesn't give the option for world drumming and mariachi and modern band and some of the things that have come into play in the last few years as important music ensembles. And then obviously adding that element of non-performer, I think, is a very important thing for our students as well. We have such a diverse student body that is really interested in so many different things. It should be a part of this policy that allows them to explore really whatever they're interested in terms of music education.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Director Jackson?
Yeah, so stick with that as well. So I'm in total agreement with it. So for me, I'm putting it in a framework of open mic. Have you ever been to an open mic set when all performers, poetry, you name it, everything? So I like that being inclusive, absolutely.
Are there any more questions? Director Simpson.
Yeah, could you just explain, just walk me through again the changes for, under number 3, hours of instruction, just number 6, where it was switched from K-8 to just 6-8?
Chair Herndon, Director Simpson, this was part of the process that we undertook with our music committees that met over the course of this year. So we went through a number of iterations of how both of these would look. And in number 6, it really is just grades 6 through 8 that will be participating in instrumental and vocal classes. It is in a K-5 school, a general music education, and we have written curriculum to address that. And then in grades 6 through 8, we have quite a number of new curricula that will address sort of the instrumental and vocal aspect of what those age group students will be participating in.
Director Zomber?
Thank you. So for some of the changes to hours of instruction, are we making these changes because the policy has been difficult to implement, or is there another reason?
Chair Herndon, Director Zombor, in our K-8 schools, it has been challenging. Those are the places with the largest student populations and a single teacher addressing a number of students. In terms of the minutes of instruction, these are minutes that we would really love to be able to achieve, and this is something that we've decided as a course of our music stakeholder group meetings to leave the minutes of instruction intact as they are. Even though we know it's challenging in those K-8 schools to meet these numbers, we've kept them as they are so that we could essentially aspire to be able to do that for our students.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
And I just want to, I know you said this, but I just want to explicitly hear you say that music instruction shall be available to all pupils in grades 7 through 12, correct? This does not change offering music instruction to those students.
Director Herndon and Director Gokul Gandhi, it does not. So our music instruction should be available to students K through 12 in every grade in our district, with some specificity depending on the type of music instruction for K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12.
And just one follow-up question, and it does not mean that you will not offer instrumental and vocal music to grades 7 through 8 in high schoolers, correct?
Chair Herndon, Director Gokul Gandhi, it does not mean that. What I intend to have happen is that the word performance includes all different kinds of ensembles, instrumental and vocal, and some that we don't even know exist yet that we want to be able to offer to our students in the future.
Okay, and if we find that that is not happening as we start the school year, will you be able to come back earlier and give us a report, and then we can problem solve from there?
Director Gokul Gandhi, absolutely, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Madam Secretary, I'd like to pass the gavel to our Vice Chair, Director
Noted.
Garcia.
So noted.
Thank you very much. Shall I go ahead?
Go ahead.
What I'd like to say is that many of the board directors received this document explaining this just minutes before the meeting started. I was already notified earlier in the day of responses to the change to item 2C. And also, I was referred to the DPI administrative rule, PI 8.01, parent 2, parent J, which is explicit in the verbiage shall be available. So music teachers have reported their concerns. I would ask that, I'd like to move that this item be moved to the full board meeting at this point, so that all of the board directors have an opportunity to study the documents, and then we'll revisit it at the full board.
Is there any need for administration to respond to that, or?
I'm waiting for this.
Madam Chair, at this time, we have a motion, and you still have the gavel. So,
Shall we go into a vote?
I need a second. No second. Vote.
Okay, let's go into a vote.
so noted. On Director Herndon's motion to forward this item to the full board without recommendation from the committee. On the motion as read, Director Gokul Gandhi. Director Jackson?
No.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Chair Garcia?
Nay?
Madam Chair, that motion fails on a tie vote for ayes and noes.
Okay.
Just a point of information, the items can still be pulled at the full board meeting, so there can still be discussion up until that point. So I just want to reassure the listening audience and our board members that for those who weren't able to get to the item this afternoon, discussion can still be had.
Thank you for that. Would you like the gavel back?
I'll take the
All right, I'm passing the gavel back.
So noted. Madam Chair, this item is still before the committee.
It was a tie.
Madam Chair, that is correct. The motion to send it to the full board without recommendation from the committee failed. So this item is still before the committee.
Okay, then we'll continue on.
All right,
Has the gavel been returned?
Yes, it has.
No. Okay.
yes, go back to me.
Get the
Can
gavel.
I just make a motion?
Go ahead.
All right. I would like to move that we accept the item before us as recommended in the redlined item.
So noted. Madam Chair? Herndon?
Okay.
Okay, I will call the roll on Director Garcia's motion to move this item, to vote on this item, the red line version. She's moving approval of the administration's recommendation for the red line version of the attachment to this item.
Thank you.
On the motion is read. Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Jackson. Director Simpson.
No.
Chair Herndon.
No.
That's 3 ayes, 2 noes. The motion passes. Madam Chair, the next item before the committee.
Right, she has to pass the gavel back.
No. So noted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 3, which is information with possible action on the district's policy review process. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you. Would administration please present this item?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this was an item submitted by the Office of Board Governance, and Jill in our office has worked with Paulette, and I just want to make sure that the information that is posted to the item is displayed for the committee and the public. So the item is being brought before you, which is laying out the district's policy review process. The Wisconsin State Statutes 119 states that the school district within the city of the first class gets to declare its own provisions relative to governing its body. And this board has adopted Board Governance Policy 2.11, which says that the board's designee will review its policies every 5th year. That process includes a review of each policy that is brought forward to the board. Before that process takes place, where the board is taking action on the policies, there's a review that's being conducted that includes research on the policy at the state, the national, and the local level. It also includes a review of the alignment to the policy to the Wisconsin state statutes, as well as the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. There's also consideration of the alignment to national best practices around each of the policies. The district's own rules and policy guidance, as well as the rules of national and state organizations relative to trending issues. So when there are national changes made to policies, those kinds of policies take priority and referral to the administration for review. That being said, the policy process is laid out in the item, and it's up for your review tonight for consideration.
Thank you very much. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Jackson.
Yes, has 5 years always been the time frame?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as far as I am aware, and I have been a part of the policy review process for a very long time. And in fact, when the policy manual was created, that 5-year process has been in place, I know, since 1996.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up?
No, there isn't.
Okay. Are there any, Director Gokul Gandhi?
So can you tell us the last time we've had a review of all of our policies?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the board governance policies and rules were presented just within this last year. Some of the administrative policies were brought forward as well. They're usually brought forward in like buckets of 5 policies at a time, given the research that needs to take place, board's consideration before adoption. And the policy manual itself does have policies that have not been revised, but have been recodified that date back, I know, to probably the 70s, such as our district's directory data policy. So the process is that a bucket of policies are reviewed at one time relative to whichever issue that is being brought forward. So for example, if there is a policy review necessary for our graduation requirements, those policies that are attached to that policy and any procedures would be brought forward at that time. So, and we were on a really good schedule with the administration in making sure that policies are either reviewed, reaffirmed, or either removed from the docket based on the validity of the district's operations and its relevance, its current relevance, and then COVID happened. And so there was a lapse in time where there were not many policies being brought forward at that time.
Thank you very much. Is there any follow-up? Director Garcia.
Thank you for that. And I think for the listening audience, if you can just for, clarification and just point of reference, direct us in the type of policies that fall under this purview. I know that there's governance policy, there's also administrative policy, and I believe we've also talked about fiscal policies. Or can you just explain what those like bigger areas are? Just so that we can get an understanding of the immensity of the policies that should go through this process.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, you have 3 buckets of policies. You have board governance policies, you have board rules, and then you have administrative policies and procedures. And so given that the board governance policies and board rules were already brought forward to the board and the board made a determination on those, the next step would be to bring forward the administrative policies. That process includes forwarding a list of policies that may be beyond that 5-year time frame for review, being sent to the administration, and then working together with OAE, the administration and board governance, to bring forth policies for the board's consideration. And so when you talk the big buckets of policies, the majority of our policies are administrative policies and procedures that govern schools and the school district's operation relative to the education side of the house. And so there are hundreds of policies.
Yes, thank you. And then a follow-up for that. Considering that it is a lot of different areas that are, under consideration through this practice, can you walk us through the type of like tools that we have utilized or are available to us in order to help facilitate, the adherence to that review process?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, relative to resources, external resources, we do have the National Association of School Boards and the Council of Great City Schools that would periodically send us over information that says that there is a trending issue on whatever the matter is, and you may want to take a look at your policies. In addition to that, I'm going to destroy their name. The law firm, Bueller Vetner Law Firm, actually also sends us over information for policies that would need to be reviewed that may have some legal implications. And so those are the resources that we actually use in making certain policies priority for consideration.
All right, and just one more.
Go
So
ahead.
just to reiterate, so the process and the timeframe, to Director Jackson's question about, the 5 years, is that something that, this is a practice that should be done every year for policies that are due 5 years ago? Or is it just a process that happens every 5 years?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is a rolling process. So there are always policies that usually are, being considered for review. If you take a look back at the legislation, rules, and policies agendas, you'll see when there are groups of policies being brought forward for consideration by the committee and then the board. And that is after the review process has taken place by the administration or board governance and OEE.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we understood that it's a continuous process.
Yes.
So I'm done with questions for now.
Director Zumber.
Thank you. So I'm really glad this is on the agenda tonight so that we can all talk about this. Policy making is one of the most essential functions of this board, and our district is strongest when we embrace a culture that values constant feedback and evaluation. And knowing that our policies should be evaluated every 5 years, and knowing that we have some policies that have not met that timeline, we have kind of inherited some pretty significantly deferred maintenance. And if we don't pick up the pace, I think it's only going to get worse. So I think what would be helpful, I just wanted to throw this out to this committee for a few things that would be helpful moving forward around this item. But we need a plan in place to get not just the policies that haven't been reviewed in the last 5 years, but some of the policies that come through this committee, they come through this committee because a name changes or there's something really minor, but I don't know that we're actually doing a full deep dive, getting feedback from the community on that policy, and is it really fair to say that we actually did that review? So my hope would be that we can get a plan in motion to start cleaning up some stale policies, identifying policies, even if they've been reviewed in the last 5 years, but what could those be? Have a calendar, if we could calendar out in the beginning of the year and say to our community, this year we're going to be looking at these policies these months. And so, we could give it to the District Advisory Council to look at and get more collaborative feedback from the community, from parents, from students. I think it would be helpful to have which office is responsible for the policies directly in the policy. I know I've said this before in one of these meetings, I'm going to say it again. If we had the policies searchable on the website, I think that is a really, really hard for me as a board member to not be able to search policies. Every other district has searchable policies on their website. Also, I think making the policies accessible to families who might not be fluent in English. I think that's a barrier. Maybe there's somewhere on the website that I'm missing because I only speak English and maybe I'm not seeing it. But just making sure that we're making these, like, we are living these policies, we're valuing them, we're taking them seriously. I think we will be so much stronger if we can get that work started. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, I'd like to add to that, Director Gokul-Gandhi, and then me.
Yeah, I was just going to, direct the Office of Board Governance based off of that commentary, and I completely agree with you. And often I feel like we talk about these policies, and then there are accompanying procedures, right, to each policy. So it doesn't just stop there. It's like the policies, the rule, and then the procedures, how we implement it. And oftentimes, I think, we talk about one thing, we don't always talk about the other thing. And so based off of Director Zomber's commentary, I would love if you could come back in a month with a plan to address sort of office responsible, and then alongside our strategic plan, each policy really should have a tie back to some part of the strategic plan. So, can we get a schedule? Can we get a mapping to the strategic plan? Can we get a timeline for language accessibility? So some of these components of updating how we can make this a living, breathing conversation, not just the individual policies, but the the assessment of where we are and a more of a meta-analysis of our policies and procedures.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, if you don't mind, I'd like to add to that as well. And specifically, it would be the importance of having procedures. We have the policy, and the policy should always, in my opinion, accompany a procedure, especially a procedure that defines the responsibility to the individuals that are expected to execute whatever it is. For example, the music. That is one of the music, the art, the FIAD. I feel that the policies should always be accompanied with a procedure so that if the employees change, that document is a living, breathing instrument that they should be expected to refer to if needed, and it should outline what they should be doing. And I think the lack of the procedures has been a problem from the time I've been on the board, actually, in executing some of these directives. And in many cases, we as board directors could really use that additional information as to how to do things. And I feel that it's very important. So I'd like to see that stressed as a part of the work that would be done moving forward, is that it automatically, the expectation would be that there would be a procedure accompanying a policy that anyone could be referred to follow through on executing whatever the case may be. I recognize that in some instances, such as a name change, that's not that elaborate or anything, but in other cases, such as when we're taking projects such as what we are still working on, the art, music, the FIAD, getting it back into the school, it is critical. And we've had a lot of staff changes in the last several years. So that's the degree of importance of having those procedures. And I'll make sure that I continue pushing that. I've been pushing it ever since I've been on the board. Thank you. And with that, are there any more? Director Gokul-Gandhi.
So I'd like to make a motion. I move that this committee directs the Office of Board Governance to come with a plan in the next, let's see, it's August, maybe as October fair, with a plan to review policies, including but not limited to office responsible, a plan for accessibility, whether it be website or language, talking about redundancies in our policies, and a general analysis of where we are in a schedule for policies and procedures that will be reviewed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Madam Chair, Director Gokul-Gandhi, members of the committee, if I'm understanding the motion, it is a comprehensive plan for ensuring that our policies have accompanying procedures and are up to date in alignment with the strategic plan. And there was one other piece.
So language and website accessibility.
Language and website.
And then also an analysis of redundancies within the policy. And I'm hoping that through this motion, you come to us and tell us that here are the 7 things that need to happen as we look, right? So, you're expert, you've done this for a number of years and have guidance. If you could also bring forth in that plan, what are the things that we're not thinking about as we're looking through these policies that we maybe need to be asking for an understanding? And then the last topical thing would be, for this calendar year, what policies will we be reviewing?
Thank you very much. Are there any more comments?
Yes, one. Is
Director
there,
Jackson.
yeah, thank you, excuse me. Is there a review panel for policies or no?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, there is not a panel for policy review.
Thank you. Are there any more comments?
I would like to, so I think that the direction that my peers are, pushing us to really think about and tackle the work before us, I think is really giving us the opportunity to, first of all, we talk about alignment. This is a great opportunity for us to really, go into that and dive deep into what alignment can look like internally, through across departments. We mentioned a lot, DPI and national trends. I think that's really important for us as a board to, have updated, things that are brought to us. So, because I think that that's the way that we can best serve the communities that we work with. But I think an important point to really highlight here is the fact that, there's a lot of research and a lot of players that are brought in that maybe us as board members are fully aware of, and let alone the public really knows the work that happens. So I think this would be a really good opportunity to really shine light on just the complexity of what has been, and maybe find ways to simplify it, and maybe, find more direct ways to create policies and procedures that are a lot more reflective in a more real time for, the changes that we're seeing in the education landscape. So I hope that, this directive not only is a way for us to meet the requirements of what we should be, doing as board members, but really using this as an opportunity for us to further connect with the community and bring them into a process that sometimes can be very, gray area. And, it's our job to, share this out with the public, that this work is being done and how it's doing, but most importantly, what we can do better. So thank you all.
Thank you. Are there any more comments at this point? Madam Secretary, since this is informational, okay?
I'm sorry, did you? Okay. Madam Chair, members of the committee, given that the majority of the policies are administrative policies, I definitely want to be inclusive and make sure that, we're working with the administration and OAE and bringing forth a plan, given that everyone is going to have to move forward in putting that plan together. And so we will definitely take the lead, given that it's the directive that the Office of Board Governance bring forth this plan. Secondly, I don't have the timeline with me on the communication plan, which is a big component of making sure that our policies on the website are searchable and language appropriate for our population. And so while October seems feasible, I want to make sure that we can bring forth a plan that addresses everything that has been raised, so that moving forward, we know how we're operating for the next fiscal year.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, since that's informational.
Madam Chair, we do have a motion by Director Gokul Gandhi for a comprehensive policy review plan to be brought back to the board by October 2023.
Okay. Would you please call the roll?
And before the board takes a vote on this motion, we do have a speaker slip.
The reason why you guys need policy stuff, I'll take it.
Go ahead, please. Please identify yourself, spell your
Deb
last name.
Kuether, Kuether. I'm speaking on, I signed up per the things, and I've sat here and listened and waiting for my 2 minutes. It is necessary for this district to spend significant time on policy review, so this item is very indeed needed. Your victims remain hopeful, and we're going to be watching for the communication plan. Do you know what it feels like when you violate your own policy? It is like pulling the rug out from under somebody when they are at their most vulnerable. It is breaking a promise. It is secondarily victimizing the person who has been already victimized. It is like writing a check on an account with no money, and it's illegal. In terms of policy implementation, you are bankrupt. 40 probable causes issued by the Wisconsin DWD-ARD is proof you do not understand the legalities of your own policies. How else would you make logic of such a finding? Your victims are watching, and you have left a long list. Families, students, employees, international educators who you treat like rehomed pets. We're waiting, we're watching. I recommend you start reading things. It is very evident that you do not have basic knowledge. And you're in a position where you are governing jurisdiction that you have no knowledge about. So we are excited to see this. We are also excited to see the recovery of $35 million that you lost for the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary,
On Director Gokul Gandhi's motion to direct the Office of Board Governance to bring forward a comprehensive policy review plan by October 2023. On the motion as read, Director Garcia? Oh,
Aye.
I'm sorry, did you want to? Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Jackson?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Chair Herndon?
aye.
That's 5 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 4, which is informational and update on the possible action on the legislative activities affecting Milwaukee Public Schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you. Administration, would you please present this item?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is on the Office of Board Governance. Mrs. Steele.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Thiel is at the podium ready to present the item.
Thank you, Chair Herndon, members of the board, Chris Thiel, Office of Governmental Relations. Just coming to the committee this evening, as we are now out of the budget season portion of the legislative calendar, and then heading into the balance of the calendar, and wanted to bring before this committee a couple of pieces of information that may be useful going forward. What you have in the attachments are two pieces. The first one is an analysis from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau that documents that, at least as of the printing of that document, the state has a balance of roughly $6 billion in the bank. There's about $4.2 billion as we head into the next year, with an additional 1.8 in the rainy day fund, as it's called. So the tail end of the activity with the budget and the governor's vetoes has left us with that amount. That's a number that we will revisit. The Legislative Fiscal Bureau and the Department of Revenue, the Department of Administration are going through their year-end process. So every year they provide an update as to the state's fiscal situation. So we will see a more precise number in 4 to 6 weeks, we imagine. But we bring that forward because we're now entering the balance of the legislative session, which will take us to about April or May, depending on what leadership in the legislature would like to do. And we have our legislative agenda, and we have another of items of emphasis that we will continue to push forward. And as I do give the updates to the board on a monthly basis, just wanted to have an opportunity to perhaps present a little more detail on what we will be doing and what we're likely to see. At this point, if the past tells us anything, we may see some battles over that $6 billion in the form of tax cuts. I think what we saw immediately after the governor's action is conversation about that, but I think it's incumbent upon us, it's incumbent upon our other districts that we work with to continue to bring forward the items that are really pressing upon all school districts, because we have already heard from our neighbors that whether it's this spring or November of next year, even though the state is sitting on $6 billion, even though the state has a constitutional responsibility to educate our students and provide a sound basic education, these districts are staring at $6 billion in state coffers and having to consider going to referendum. So board members know about this, but having the opportunity to say this out loud and have the public hear and understand what's going on, I think helps us set the context, because it will be confusing as we move forward. One of the main issues that we continue to emphasize and that the administration has obviously done a lot of work on is making sure that we're retaining and bringing in teaching staff and other professional educators. And you've probably heard this, but we're in a situation where if you bring up the teacher crisis, and it is a crisis in the state of Wisconsin, you may hear responses like, well, that's happening all over the country. You know, kind of throwing hands in the air as if there weren't anything that could be done. And that's why the other attachment that you have before you from the Wisconsin Policy Forum, I think, is so helpful and informative, in that it reviews the last 10 years or so of teacher turnover in the state of Wisconsin, and really points to the fact that after Act 10, and then not surprisingly in the years after COVID, the pressure on our professional educators was extremely and has been extremely high, and points to the fact that we as a state, with the resources we have, should really be focused on doing everything we can to improve the teacher workforce and retain our staff and put them in a position to succeed. How do we do that? States like Michigan point the way. Michigan just passed their budget and has taken $66 million from the state level, owning the responsibility that the state is the one responsible for making sure our students are properly educated, and is investing that $66 million in creating teachers, in essentially asking people and saying to them, we need you, we need the smartest people we have to become the best professional educators that they can be, and we shall pay for that. We have models here in this state. We've talked before about the Teacher Pledge program, for example, at the University of Wisconsin. It's privately funded. We have a privately funded model because we have people who value our students and know what the circumstances are, trying to implement a policy that the state has the dollars to fund. So we will continue to push actions such as that and continue to take moments like these to highlight the fact that this work is not in vain. We need to talk about it, we need to create it, and we need to move these policies forward when we can. What's going to happen is we'll probably see, and we're already starting to see, some policies move forward at the state level that aren't really trying to aim that high. There may be important policy, but I think as we move forward, we're going to hear a discussion about some other items. That there's a task force created today on truancy, certainly an important topic, and we will be monitoring and be engaged in that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that where the state has the power to move things at its level, it should be focused on that. And some of these other policies certainly are within the purview of school boards, such as truancy and what have you. Similarly, the administration, the school board has moved forward a financial literacy policy. We will see legislative action on that, we assume, in the coming weeks, where there will be a directive from the state to provide financial literacy. We already do that. The question then would be, what are we really putting in the hands of our students to activate that? We can give them a financial literacy class, but what are we putting, in some instances, the capital in the hands of our students so that they can move forward and actually use the tools that we're giving? There's a new policy, for example, a new federal law that comes into effect next year, where we are I think that our community writ large, and there's been a lot of talk about college savings plans, which are important. But we also know that there are families out there that have college savings plans and are introducing their students to Roth IRAs, long-term savings vehicles, that their children, you can open a Roth IRA at any age, right? And so the question is, with a Roth IRA, where do you get the capital? It has to be earned income. A student has to earn that income. If you have a lemonade stand as a child, you can put that into a Roth IRA. But there's a new change to federal law coming in 2024, where if you have some excess in your college savings plan, for example, your 529, there is a moment where you can transfer that 529 college savings money into a Roth IRA. What is the state doing? Representative Goyke and others have introduced policies to really try to empower our kids. Let's not just have a financial literacy class. Let's make sure that that 14-year-old sitting in that financial literacy class starts Googling the, compound interest calculator, finds out about this wonderful thing, and then finds out, I've got $300 in the bank, and then that tool becomes active for that student. So we're really going to have this back and forth where I think that, at least preliminarily, hopefully we can do some bigger things, but we may see some activity taken at the state level that school boards already have the power to do, and we know we need the state to use the tools that they have at that level, whether it's for helping create more teachers, putting actual tools in the hands of students, things that the school boards, let the school boards do what the school boards can already do. Let's have the state implement policy that we need to be helpful. So we're going to continue to try to elevate those conversations and have them, and I will provide updates with those activities. But I think the theme will be all of this work is useful. There will hopefully come a time when we can implement some of this work that we're doing with our partners. Whether or not we can move it forward this legislative session, we will see, but these are conversations well worth having. So happy to answer questions if you have them.
Okay, committee, Director Jackson.
Yeah, with that $1.8 billion rainy day fund, that's real ambiguous. It's so vague. So how can we, you being our representative, access that in any capacity, considering it's pretty much miscellaneous?
Well, sorry, Director Herndon, Director Jackson. We're having a conversation here, I think, with the general public, where we're trying to kind of decode the legislative language and bring it into common sense language, right? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense that we have what is called a budget stabilization fund. It's a rainy day fund. Can a state have a budget stabilization fund when a majority of its districts have to go out to operational referendum because the state has not provided per pupil funding that's kept pace with inflation? So technically, and the folks at the state level write these rules, they could unwrite them, but technically somebody at the state level would tell you, well, we can't access that money because you've got to use a particular key on a particular lock, and it's all, and common sense, I think, would tell all of us, wait a minute, there's 1.8 billion sitting on a shelf, right, while our students need access to it. So the reason I do raise it, and I mean, it's kind of locked in there, when we hear about that locked box language, that's in there, and on top of the fact that we have a balance in that $4 billion range. But the reason I bring it up is, again, to kind of get at this issue where if people aren't aware of that and they're thinking, what can we do? The point of that is, let's have a healthy conversation with our legislators to say, this doesn't make sense. You can't, it's raining out here. Mm-hmm. Right? And so if you're sitting under a dome in the Capitol, maybe the rain's not getting at you. But out here, it's raining. So we can't have 1.8 billion. Or frankly, they don't even have to get to that 1.8 billion. Let's axe some of that $4 billion balance to do what's needed. So that's kind of the heart of the conversation, is to educate people that it's there in the first place, to then get to that next conversation with more specifics.
Okay.
Director Simpson.
Thank you. And I know that in the past you've spoken about, how districts really across the state are feeling this, and how there is sort of a renewed effort to work collaboratively together to elevate our voice as people working in education to state legislators to make our voices heard. Could you just speak a little bit about efforts across the state, across school districts, and that kind of organization, regionally maybe, just about how we're trying to make sure that our voices are heard collectively.
Sure, Director Herndon, Director Simpson. I think we are in that space. I mean, I spoke over the first half of the year how we were working and frankly focused on the two issues of having a per pupil increase of $1,510 and then being focused on that 60% reimbursement rate, 90% reimbursement rate for special education. And I think we're in a moment that's understandable where as the state budget has passed, people have put forth all this effort. We have not met, the state has not accomplished the goals some would argue that they're constitutionally bound to accomplish. And so there's a little bit of an exhaustion factor. So how do we rally with each other to get these things back on the table so we're not feeling like you're just saying rah, rah, but really putting it into action. So we thankfully have built networks across the state. Networks, we're part of the Southeastern Wisconsin Schools Alliance, the Wisconsin Public Education Network. And this is that time when some of this network strength comes in because people that just have really pushed very hard. We're now back at the district level trying to figure out what this budget means for us. And as we go through that process, I think we will again, re-energize and push through the tail end of the legislative session. We have been successful in the past in calling on the governor for a special session on some of these items. So I would not be surprised if we see special sessions going forward on various topics. We just saw the university system is being underfunded in a way that it does not have to be underfunded. We could provide more there as well. So we will try to take the moments where we can with our partners so we have a loud enough voice together to try once again to move some of these things forward for our students.
Well, and thank you, because when you talk about having that level of fatigue and exhaustion, I know you're part of that on a daily basis. So, thank you for continuing to work with our partners and, try to keep, our voices elevated to the level that, our legislators need to hear. So just thank you for working through that fatigue factor.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, I'd like to pass the gavel, please.
I have the gavel.
Thank you. I'd like to ask for a point of privilege, Madam Chair. I'd like to expand this, Mr. Thiel, the conversation at this point, to something that was just in the news, that the state is changing the child labor laws. And the first thing I thought about in that happening is the impact on educating our students, especially here in Milwaukee. So that's the reason why I wanted to expand the conversation and find out from you, what have you found out about that? I know what I read, and it was not exciting, to say the least, when 14-year-olds they're no longer required to have a job permit. Nobody even has to execute one. The amount of time that they work is unlimited from the age of 14 up, which means if the past provides us with any knowledge, many of our youth value those jobs after school more than they value going to school and getting an education. So could you share the information on that for both, hopefully, my peers here as well as the public?
Mr. Sia.
Director Garcia, Chair Herndon. That's something we've been monitoring, certainly. We know that a large portion of our population of students currently not only put the time in with school, but then work as well. And the concerns you raise have been raised. At this point, we have not been directly involved in that conversation, but we have been working with our partners, just, I think, in the same terms that you've stated, being concerned that we're certainly in a slippery slope type situation. We've already, something that's already been out there in terms of what influences school boards is the fact that we have school districts across the state that would like to have control of their own calendars in terms of start date and other things like that. And it was 20 plus years ago that industry got involved, and we have calendars dictating what schools can and cannot do in some terms, except in situations where we have waivers. So I think your concerns are certainly the top of mind for our partners at the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, School Administrators Alliance, and in other places. And we will monitor that and intervene as we can to make sure that students are protected, as you say, even when they are pursuing things in the moment which are of their interest. We know that the reason the laws were in place in the first place was to make sure that students were able to get through their academic careers to put them in a better spot.
Thank you very much.
Is there any follow-up, President Herndon?
That's it for me, so
All right.
I'll take the gavel back. Thank you.
No problem.
With that, that was informational, so thank you, Mr. Thiel,
Thank
for
you.
all of your information. If no one else has anything to speak up on this item or questions to ask, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Madam Chair, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
Okay, there being no further business before the committee, this meeting is adjourned.